it's Silva Bumpa here. I'm with Music Radar Tech, and I'm going to be breaking down my tune Feel the Same with Carla Monroe. Let's get into it. The first thing is the piano. So this is like the initial idea that I had for the tune. I was actually playing the piano, and this is the melody that I wrote. I was kind of inspired by, last summer I was going to see a lot of, kind of like, there was a scene coming around like start of last year, which was inspired by this hard house, piano house from the 90s. Artists like melodies, and Hofstadt were playing these very like euphoric tunes, and I was over there in Amsterdam hearing a lot of this kind of music, and I really wanted to try and create something in that style. So I wanted to write a piano hook that was like, felt the same way, that kind of, the same vibe that the stuff that I was hearing over there gave me. So very euphoric energy. So yeah, that's what I've got. But this is literally just a classic M1 sounds. A little bit of reverb, a little bit of delay. And I've supported this. So what I like to do a lot of the time is just duplicate a channel like this and drag other sounds onto, basically see if there's any sort of frequencies that could be missing in the original sound, or any textures that could be added that kind of support the sound. One of the things I noticed, that it wasn't like, I wanted it to be a bit more natural. So I was going through Roland Cloud, and they've got these kind of like classic 90s, 80s sort of digital pianos, but they have a very organic feel to them. So I sort of layered that very quietly in the background, and it just sort of, I mean, you can play these together, it kind of makes it a little bit more, it gives it more bottom end. Another sound that I found was this, kind of like a vocal pad. It sort of gives it a bit of air, a bit more space, and a bit more sort of harmonic support in the high end. So all of them together just make it feel a bit more, make it feel a bit more, a bit bigger, a bit more special. There are two kind of main piano hooks that sort of play after each other. One thing that I really liked is just how well they went into each other. This felt like very kind of euphoric, and this hook felt very sort of like there was tension from this hook. So yeah, so like once I had this initial idea, I was really happy with this piano sound. Another thing that I was doing last summer is I was hanging around a lot of like old school like bassline producers. I was in the studio with this guy called TS7, who's like a legend to me. He's like made loads of classic bassline tunes, and he was sort of talking me through like how he used to like make a lot of his music. And they were saying that they used to like make R&B instrumentals and record to them, and then almost like remix those old R&B instrumentals. So I was like, you know, maybe I'll try that as well. I was kind of itching to try this actually, and I was actually in the studio with Carla Monroe like the week after. So I had this piano melody already written down. I exported it, pitched it down, and slowed it down so that I could write to it. I suppose it sort of sounded a little bit like this. I could sort of just show you a demonstration. I think I slowed it down to about 105 BPM and pitched it down about 2. It's sort of, so that was the speed. I suppose like the sound that I was going for was like the classic sort of garagey, bassliney sound, where all the R&B kind of acapellas, when they were sped up, the runs and kind of the vibrato and the slides in the vocals were kind of accentuated and sped up, and it just kind of just sounded a little bit more like the music that I grew up on, the music that kind of made me fell in love with dance music, which was this classic sort of R&B style garage. So I wanted to try and get that energy into the tune. So when Carla Monroe came in, I just played this loop over and over again. There was like a kind of a click in the background as well. And we just wrote to that. And she actually managed to nail it in literally about 15 minutes. I was just like, give me the most R&B hook you can.
Tell me, could you be the one, be the only one? Tell me, do you feel the same? Baby, when the lights are on and the night is done, baby, do you wanna stay? I could be all the things you want. We could do it all just for fun. Tell me, could you be the one, be the only one?
So yeah, that's what it sounds like slow. And then obviously when you speed it up, it sounds a little bit more like the kind of garagey sound that we kind of know.
Tell me, could you be the one, be the only one? Tell me, do you feel the same? Baby, when the lights are on and the night is done.
So yeah, when I had that down, I was feeling really, really happy with it. I think Carla Monroe did such a good job. And that was the kind of bare bones of the tune. I actually left this idea for about a year and just as like kind of something that was just there to use in the future. It was only when it came like to next summer, like this summer that we're in, that I was like, okay, I need something kind of summery, piano, euphoric for the festivals. So I sort of brought it back and produced a tune. But yeah, we'll get into the production side of things now. So I suppose the next thing that I would have done was the drums. I can talk you through roughly how I made these. So when I make drums, it's mostly about like trying to get the groove down as quick as possible. One thing that I always like try and do initially is get a kick and clap that already feel like they're giving me a groove. So I have this kick sound here. It's just like a classic sort of 909 kind of hit. I've done a little bit of boosting here. This plugin actually kind of just brings out some bass around 30 hertz. I don't know how much of a good idea this actually is putting in a tune, but it just sort of gives it a little bit of low end, which I think just helps increase like the depth of the tune. I do that sometimes. It's essentially just increasing the release time of the kick. But if you play the kick and the clap together, there almost feels like, to me, that there's like a bit of a groove from those two sounds, which is like what I'm trying to do when I start the drums. I've just layered loads and loads of sounds together. When I produce, I tend to just keep layering and turning stuff down. I always try and remind myself to just find a sound that works, but I kind of just prefer it this way. I just think it's like the way that I've learned how to do it. It's just kind of just keep trying stuff and keep layering stuff until you have the tone and the textures that you want in the tune. So yeah, these are the main sort of clap. This is the main clap that you'll hear in the tune. Obviously there are other loops in the song with claps in them that will add to the clap, but this is the main sort of frequency that you hear, the main clap. You can see here that I've used this transient shaper, which has brought out the initial hit and taken off the sustain of the actual sound itself. Without it, it's just a very big clap, whereas now it's a bit more pointy. You can see here that this is kind of giving the tail of the clap. There's a tiny little bit of reverb here, literally only 8.7%. I've taken all the high end to give it this kind of like classic sort of clap feel. This is giving more of the texture in the bottom end. And this is probably something that's a little bit more harsh to sort of give it that weight. So all of them together, I'm always trying to, with the sound that I'm trying to go for, have sounds in there that give punch, but also have sounds that bring texture to the drum loop, essentially. So yeah, once the kick and clap are down, I would start probably adding loops onto the sound, just not because that's like the end of the drum programming for me. It's more about kind of like, sometimes a loop can just tell you where you should go with the groove of the drums, and then you can start filling in the gaps from there. So I literally just like try and aim for kind of old school house drum loops, old school disco loops, old school speed garage loops that I've you know, taken from sample packs. So you can see here, I will have just dragged a lot of these sounds on. So here's a shaker loop and a tambourine loop. You can hear that with the clap and the kick. Now give it a lot of movement already. And also this kind of makes the track roll a little bit better as well. Here's another loop here. A very swung tech house phasey type of loop with a lot of texture. A lot of these loops are really turned down. I think one of the things that I always do with my production is you always feel the kick, the clap and the hi-hat the most, but the loops are kind of in the background, sort of giving it a bit of texture, but not necessarily adding much to the groove as the other sort of main elements would give you. Here's this kind of like phasey sort of disco loop. You know, this is very quiet, minus 30 dB, and the kick's hitting at pretty much 0 dB. Here are some more speed garage loops that I've layered. These are kind of adding to the open hi-hat. A lot of the time with my hi-hats, I don't have, you know, they're just one hi-hat. So using these old school loops can kind of bring a little bit more variation to the hi-hat. So now if I play the loops and the claps together, you get this. In fact, I just missed that one. So yeah, at this point, I was really liking it, but I think that one thing that I would do at this stage now is to reinforce the loop. So if I feel like the clap needs to be stronger, I'd have another clap on there, or just make the claps that I've got a little bit stronger by mixing them or turning them up. But one thing I noticed that I need a big hi-hat on there. I think one of the things I've noticed about a lot of the songs that are played in like Amsterdam and the more faster kind of trance influenced style of garage like melodies and Marlon Hofstadt, people like Kyle Starkey, is kind of this big hi-hat, very large rolling hi-hat. This is what I came up with. It's sort of a combo of quite a few different things, similar to what I was doing with the claps. There's hi-hats that give punch, there's hi-hats that are like to make it feel like it's rolling, and there's hi-hats to give it texture and weights in the mix. So I can just go through the individual sounds. So this is a classic 909. I always, with every production I do, I always have just a little, you know, 909s just put in there just to give it that kind of classic energy to it. So yeah, that's just literally a classic 909 with, you know, some ADSR stuff done to it. Here's another 909, which is a bit more textural, a bit flows a little bit better. And then this is where the transient is coming from. It's like a very strong, weighty tech house style shaker. You can see now if I play these first three, you can hear that initial hit of the hi-hat. You know, like that's the stuff that you would hear on the speakers when you go out, is that initial transient. If you just have these two, it's there, tonally it's sounding really nice, but with that, it just makes it pop out the mix. I've got one more hi-hat here, which is a shaker, which is adding even more transients. I think one thing about this hi-hat, it's very high-endy, whereas this is kind of, it's got more of the weight to it. So all of them together, this is the sound that we've created. So that is the drums, essentially, broken down. This was the initial sort of drum that I had, and it was the sound, and it was what worked with the song. Although when I was making the song, I noticed that it wasn't, you know, tonally I liked it, had a lot of texture, had a lot of groove, but I wanted there to be more power to the drums. So quite often when I come back to songs and get them ready to send out for mixing, I add like the final sort of like very poppy extra hi-hats and claps that just make it really pop. So here's just another drum rack that I've created of just a hi-hat and a clap. And you can see now when I add this on, without it, it's there, but it doesn't have as much punch as this does. And I've topped this off as well with a little loop that I've added at the end as well, just to give it a bit more kind of texture. You can hear that kind of metal, sort of filtered energy that it brings to the drum groove. I always like those classic disco loops. They just bring a lot of like character to the tune. So I always try and throw a few of them in there. It's also worth mentioning, everything I've got here is swung. I don't know if I've actually programmed any ghost snares. I have one here, but these will all be swung 1665, and you can see at the top here I'm reducing that down only to 35% in my global groove pool, but you know, it's still swung a little bit. So yeah, that's the drums. One thing that I got taught a while ago is just solo like certain elements of your tune with the kick drum. And it kind of like almost helps me like figure out what I need to sort of fill in with the groove, or with the instruments, with the drums even, with the effects. I think it almost like, it's almost like enough of the tune to kind of like still feel what the tune could be like, but then just the most important elements, essentially, the kick and the vocals, or this could be the kick and the bass, the kick and the pianos. But yeah, this is something that I always do a lot, and I often try and write to it. So now I've got the kick, the vocal, and the organ soloed, or the full instrument rack, but it's just the full instrument group, but it's just the organ playing at the moment. So I really like to like write to this, have a kick, the vocal, and then write a melody to that. So that is the organ melody that I came up with the kick and the vocal playing in the background. So you can see this is also swung as well. Sometimes I swing certain elements of the tune more than the other. As you can see here, I've actually moved this G sharp note forward, which won't be getting affected by the swing. And that's because I would have probably felt at the time that it didn't groove the way that I liked the Ableton 1665 swing. Try to move it even more. I think it just sounds cooler in that position. So I decided to move that. But yeah, all the other notes I'm pretty sure are on the lines. So yeah, this organ is a very punchy, classic sort of organ sounds that I found in a sample pack. It has a very strong transient. You can sort of hear it, and it's really giving the track a lot of energy, this high end. all the frequencies above 1000 hertz. And if you were to take these away, not only would you hear that organ less, but I think that the clickiness gives it a lot of energy. So when I was looking for an organ, I really wanted this. This is a similar kind of organ sound that you'd hear in like old school Amsterdam hard house tunes, you know, like 145 BPM, even old school trance tunes. It's like that classic sort of, yeah, that classic sound. So once I found that sound, I knew it would be right for this tune. So at this point, the core tune is essentially done. One thing that I really like to do though, and I spoke about this with the piano sound, is obviously duplicating your tracks and dragging other sounds onto it to see what works. One thing that I quite like doing is doing that and then automating the volume so that at the end of the phrase, another sound kind of comes in and reinforces it. So I have chose this sound. It's a classic distorted kind of organ stab thing. Oh my God. You can hear it now in the group that when you play it with this one. It just gives you something, you know, for your ears to listen to, and just switches up really. Also, it's kind of a sound like, to me now, this organ sound sounds like the kind of organs that like you would have heard in, you know, them kind of old school early 2000s Birmingham, Sheffield style organ house tunes, which like I personally love. So it just makes it sound a little bit more like of that era, which I like. And I kind of want to bring, I wanted to make a song that was like, I had the Amsterdam, the R&B, the garage feel, but also had the kind of the northern organ house sound that sort of I love. And I try and make it a kind of running theme with a lot of the Silva Bumpa tracks that I put out. So yeah, throwing them in. I've also here, in the breakdown, the organ goes into something a bit more low key. Like I said, with this organ having so much high end and so much energy, as I'm transitioning out of the first drop and into the second build up, I wanted an organ that brought down that energy and sort of crossed the bridge with those two sections. This is also being supported by a classic sort of lately bass, Yamaha style lately bass. You can hear again as well, I'm bringing in another sound like I did with the first drop with this FAC 71 sound. I'm bringing in this sound here, which is this like slidey seventh kind of saw wave bass sound, which I use a lot. It's kind of it's given that kind of jacking house, fidget house kind of feel from the 2010s that I also am very inspired by. I'll talk about the processing of a lot of the instruments. I have this RC20 plugin, which I use a fair bit. And you can hear here that I've got the stereo setting on this. If I was to increase the magnitude of this plugin, you can hear just how much that's kind of expanding it in the stereo field. It's giving that chorus energy to it, and it's making it sound a little bit rougher, a bit more old school. I find this plugin really helps like me sort of mix certain instruments, certain sounds into the song. It kind of makes it feel like it's a part of the song and not sticking out of the song. So yeah, I use RC20 a lot. I think I actually use it even more aggressively on this lately style bass. So this is, yeah, yeah, I think I don't know if it's called a solid bass, a lately bass. I hear it being called a few different things, but we've got in this plugin here the Fem Basso, the Solid RE1. I love this bass so much, it's just so good. But yeah, this is the kind of processing. Without all this processing, if I just turn it all off, it's really nice tonally, but I found that it didn't really pop out of the mix. So essentially what I'm doing here is sort of turning up the high ends a lot, actually. You know, adding high end, this erosion adds a lot of noise to the sound. Without it, you know, it could do with a little bit of sort of noise, a bit of grain. I find adding that really helps sort of make that pop out of the mix. I think on the RC20 you can do something similar by doing this digital sound here. This is kind of a bit crushing the sound, downgrading the audio, which brings some of the high end. So I really like using these two plugins to really help it to sort of blend into the mix, but also, you know, at the same time bringing those frequencies out so that it also does pop out of the mix. You can see here as well, I use kickstart a lot, which is obviously ducking the sounds when the kick is hitting to give space. One thing that I found though when I was making this tune is that you know, sometimes I'd actually have the kickstart on 100%, but for this one I didn't think that it needed it. I think that it almost made it sound a bit too almost modern, and I wanted it to sound a bit more classic. You can hear with this lately bass, there's not even any kickstart at all. There might be some on the master groove. There's a tiny little bit on the group, on the bus, 14%. But you know, there really isn't that much. And I took it down just because I wanted it to have more of a classic sort of feel. So yeah, this is the kind of the basis of what's going on with the bass and the instruments in this group. You can hear as well, I am using this Verb Spray plugin. It's like a Max for Live, but this is being automated on the transition. And you can hear that it's kind of like just giving more suspense, I suppose. Like in this section as a whole, you know, we're coming out this first drop, I wanted there to be some sort of feeling that something's going to happen. You can hear the kick disappears. And I kind of wanted to create this kind of feel where it's sort of like faded into nothing, essentially. So yeah, that was one of the ways I did that. This string also helps with that as well, create tension. And when it returns back to the original pianos. This time though, it's supported by these two instruments here, which is another two instruments playing the exact melody. I think I wanted to have a bell, but then my friends said it sounded a little bit too friendly. So then I put this sound in. But I think I almost missed the bell a little bit, so I've kind of just created a bit of a combo of the two sounds together. You can hear that with the piano, it helps sort of give it a little bit more energy in the second bit. So yeah, that is the instrument group, and that's pretty much the only musical information going on in the actual song, other than obviously the vocals. That's pretty much it, which is actually that's not as much as I normally put in a tune, but I think that I like the simplicity of this tune. I think it's just, I think with the vocal being quite intense, and being quite quick, and there being a lot of information, I definitely wanted to make sure I didn't make this tune too overwhelming. because I've done that in the past. I still do it, just put too much in the tune and then it just sort of ruins it. But yeah, I think these instruments just give it enough so that it makes sense. So yeah, I suppose they're kind of like all the core elements of the tune. I think the rest of the track and the automations and the sounds is all kind of about supporting what I've got. It's either like building more tension, making the transitions better, and just making it sound polished and a finished tune. One thing I actually noticed about this track when I was looking over this was just how many effects are in this. There's a lot of kind of sparkly sweeps, risers that kind of just I added to give it more intensity and just to make it move between the sections better. So there's loads of little sounds I've just added over time. All these little scratches and lifts, little like disco filter breaks, big sweeps as well. I mean, just everything is just very like sparkly and very shiny, which I think just goes with the tune. A lot of these are kind of like typical of like a lot of the speed garage records that I'm into. It's just a lot of effects, a lot of dub sirens, a lot of delays, a lot of scratches, rewinds, sirens, things like that. Crashes, build-ups, which is just, you know, typical of that sound and that style. One thing that I actually often do is have some white noise playing in the background of the tune the entire time. So this is one MIDI group that's going for pretty much the entire length of the tune. It's really quiet, but it just every single time a section comes in, it's like this, just, you know, piece of noise that kind of just glues everything together. Essentially, it is just a noise, you know, operator creating some noise. It's being filtered. This erosion is adding some more harmonic information. It's being very heavily sidechained to give it some rhythm. And then this transgate is obviously giving that groove that you can just hear. I'll turn it up so you can actually hear it. And then it's being filtered to give it that very classic, phasey sort of sound. So that's something that I really like to do with my tunes. I mean, you can see here as well, I've also got like some other sweeps that are just constantly happening. I mean, literally there's like never a moment where it's not happening. Which I think is really, I think it just helps glue everything together. You can see if I put the effects together. It's very cinematic. Some disco stabs. Some more dub sirens, some snare rolls. Yeah, and that little whip sound. I think that's actually from a Korg M1, I think. But yeah, so that is the effects. Yeah, just to kind of finish things off, I'll talk about some of the processing I've done to the vocals. I actually bounced I said at the start of the video that I recorded the vocal loop with Carla Monroe at a slower tempo, and I exported it. And I actually didn't ever go and use the original vocal stems. I just used this original vocal loop that I have. I've done a lot of editing, mostly to edit out a lot of the pops and clicks and problems in the recording and some of the timing problems. You can see here I'm kind of like automating. automating EQs and ducking certain frequencies and sounds, just because there were a few sounds and I couldn't get rid of the pops and clicks. But I don't think you can really notice it too much in the final thing. But
Tell me, could you be the one, be the only one? Tell me, do you feel the same? Baby, when the lights are on and
so yeah, and like I've edited out I've faded out some of the audio because I imagine there was probably some breaths and some clicks, and I just wanted to clean it up. But yeah, so the original clip that I already had was fairly compressed and edited and de-essed. I've just kind of like done another round of audio processing on this. I suppose I wanted this tune to kind of feel like I'd almost sampled it, and I think by treating it like a sample, it almost like forces you to kind of just like it was like a splice sample or something like that, or an old R&B a cappella, and that was the kind of like vibe that I wanted to go in with this tune, is just to feel like I'm making a remix of the song that I'd already made, which is what I was sort of inspired by. So yeah, I'm very aggressively EQing this vocal. And there's way more low end in that. I probably should. I could leave more low end in there, but I chose to take it out. So it makes it just a bit more like sparkly, a bit more. It sounds a bit more old school, a bit more sampled, because there's like less sort of frequencies in it, in a way. These are just delaying the sounds a little bit. I'm actually sidechaining the vocal a little bit. I think this kind of helps it sound a little bit more like a remix, which I like the sound of in a tune. And then, just some soothe, which is kind of just... I mean, that is doing actually quite a lot. Arguably too much there. I suppose it's just making it sound almost... I think maybe I was just trying to make this sound almost a little bit cheap in a way, which I think is kind of the vibe that I was sort of going for a little bit. It's like that cheap sampled YouTube ripped style a cappella that I like built my entire sort of sound off. So I think that maybe I would be a little bit, maybe it would be a little bit over the top if I used a vocal that almost was really well rounded and very like, I don't know, like full sounding. Maybe it sounds a bit cooler without it, I don't know. But and probably as well giving space for the instruments as well to come through as well, which is nice.